Hello, and welcome to another season of the Storied Arcs podcast. I am your co-host, Mike.
And I'm your co-host, Alex.
And as is our custom, we will be opening this new season with a zero episode, as we frequently refer to them, or creator spotlight and introduction. And the creator spotlight this week is on Lynn Smith, and the introduction is to the book Plume. Now, this is a book that you probably never saw as an option on the shelf of new releases at your comic shop in terms of single issue.
Probably not.
It's really for the webcomic readers. And it does exist in print form. We'll get into that when we get to our creator spotlight on Devil's Due. But first, let's talk about the book itself.
Sure.
Genre-wise.
What would you say? I mean, it's a Western, definitely. You start
Western there. It's the dominant theme is a Western. It's like there's no getting around it.
The setting is a Western.
Right.
The setting's a Western. By Western, not just like
Old West.
It's our Old West. It's Old West
right.
in the state. The way that we think of that time period. But it's got some magical elements to it. There's a little mysticism to it.
It's not a fantasy world, but it is a world with fantastical elements.
Yeah. They know. So it's a setting that seems very familiar. With some when you think about the magical items, tropes, magical relics and things like that from, what do you say, like ancient civilizations or other cultures or whatever. I think we make mention of things like Indiana Jones or something like that. That there are these sacred items that possess a level of power in our world. But it's
the main difference with that
in our Old West. When you think about the Old West, whether it's an old Western movie or whatnot, old school TV shows, anything in that genre, that's the setting, that's the time and place. So you're going to get all of those tropes and character archetypes. You're just going to get a little bit of a twist.
Yeah, and unlike Indiana Jones, it was always a twist when the fantasy element kicked in. Usually in the final act, whereas this is like, no, this isn't a surprise or anything. It's baked right into the premise.
I was going to say it is there.
Page one.
It's pretty upfront that there's a little bit extra going on. It's our world plus it's a little bit of spice. So it's a, I think if you're a fan of Westerns, if you're a fan of that kind of genre, I think you're going to see a lot of things you recognize. Almost everything you're going to recognize. Every character that's introduced has a base archetype that, I think for the semi-knowledgeable reader, you're going to recognize right away and have a sense of, I know this character. I know what's going to happen to him or her. And I think what Kaylin does in the execution of her story is identify, I think specifically the character archetypes, because it's a very small cast. It's very, very much a character-driven book. She identifies those things and in some ways kind of goes out of her way to subvert some of those ideas, taking basic Western story tropes and flipping them on their head a little bit. I mean, that's a little too harsh, maybe too extreme.
I think it's fair to say because the Westerns as a genre can be so stale, like because they're so repetitive. Which is like, what the comp now is like, superhero movies. It's like, they always have their power and they do this and they do this. And that's
not just that though, but like any action movie. Like I love the John Wick movies, but they're all the same. I love the Mission Impossible movies, but they're all the same. That every Taken movie is the same. So whether it's an action movie, things like that, any sort of, they have these beats to them. And yes, Plume falls into that, just that lineage of Western stories where you're going to see setups to stories and to characters of things you recognize, but she puts a little spin on it and said none of it comes from like way out of left field. I think it's very organic, especially with the character stuff. I think because as I just said, it's intensely character focused. It's all about this very, very small group of main characters. I mean, there aren't even really any like ancillary characters. There's probably just a handful of like other people, like extras. Right. It's very small. It's very focused. It's very tight. And I think that makes for it plays to her strengths, I think, as a storyteller, because those characters are so engaging. And it's clear that is what she's interested in more than like what the world is. I think one thing you'll hear discussed as you and I go through the book is the idea of like, none of this is explained. Like, why do some of these things have magic? Like, why is there magic here? Why are some of these artifacts enchanted or powered in some way? That doesn't matter. They just are. Where do we find them? Who? How do you track them down? How do you collect them? Doesn't matter. None of that's important. You just accept the premise and you stay with the story because you care about the characters. You care about their journey, their quest, their growth, their story. So yeah, that premise, that setup, it just gets you into it. It's a vessel, it's a vehicle for her to explore these characters and explore their relationships with each other. From taking them all on this journey together and seeing how they grow and change and adapt.
Yeah. And I will say, it's not just if you're a fan of Westerns, but in my case, and I suspect in Lynn's, if you have any nostalgia about that, if you grew up in a household where your dad, grew up in the 60s, 70s and was into Westerns, you probably caught some by osmosis.
Yeah.
And the familiarity of Westerns, I think, is enough to let you enjoy this if you're digging the fantasy elements.
Yeah. Oh, I know. I agree. I think there is,
because I wouldn't call myself like a fan of Westerns in general. Like, I'm not going to plop down any given day and watch a Western.
And enough, you're familiar enough with it that when you see a Western, whether it's a modern one or another old one, something like that, you feel a level of comfort.
Because I know the archetypes, right? I can drop in as like the character names don't even matter. I'm like, I know that guy's role.
Exactly. Yeah. Good guy, bad guy. Yeah.
Yeah. White hat. Oh, the compromise hero. We must be in the 70s. And I think, like, I'm thinking like the book this year that's on shelves in 2023 that, like, I like the creators, the art is stunning, but it's pitched as just a pure Western. It's the Enfield Gang Massacre, which is, I think, in the Texas Blood thing.
Yeah, it's like a
Jake
prequel.
Phillips.
And that's
I'm just like, God, it looks
Condon and Phillips. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Cool covers, but I'm like, I just don't know if I can get that into a Western, like a pure Western play. And I've just kind of been sitting on it. I might pick it up and trade. But
also I think that Texas Blood is effectively a modern day Western. I think I read some of the early issues of that, and I think it's very much kind of like a modern day setting, modern day Western, and the Enfield Game Massacre is just like, it's kind of a prequel to it. So it's all kind of a piece there. But I think books like that, and even Plume, I think you can tell they're made by people who, have to have some level of affinity for the genre. Whether how much they truly are fans of it, or maybe, like you said, just grew up with it and through osmosis picked up the beats and the characteristics of this style of storytelling, this setting, because it's made with a sense of, if not love, but at least respect for the genre. Someone who knows what the reader, what the audience is going to, what they're going to anticipate, when they think of a Western and they see character A or B, and they are going to immediately identify who that person is in this type of story. I think in a way Plume kind of relies on that. Like, I think like every Western does, especially as we move from the, your traditional Westerns, as you mentioned, into like the Sergio Leone kind of spaghetti Westerns of the 70s with Clint Eastwood, into something like Unforgiven. Those movies in a lot of ways rely, especially something like Unforgiven. Unforgiven relies on the fact that you identify Clint Eastwood as the man with no name. Even though it's not in that universe, the movie, it's not predicated on it, but like it's assuming the audience already has a pre-existing relationship with this actor and this character in this type of world. And so I think when you read a book, I think Plume has a sense of that, where Kalen's expecting people to read this and say, oh, I know who that guy is. And letting the audience do a little bit of work there, so she can tell the story she wants to tell and not be worried about having to explain who this guy is and what their role is going to be. She can do that pretty quickly and in rapid succession on a couple panels, on a couple pages, and know that the audience is going to correctly identify who that person is in this.
Yeah. And you're talking about identifying things in a couple of pages, and it's worth now, I guess, talking about how it was originally published, which was what's the name? Jeeves.
On the way, it was uploaded to Smack Jeeves.
Smack Jeeves, yes. Yeah. Which have you had a chance to look at the Smack Jeeves archive at all?
I did, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, because it's for those listening now, Smack Jeeves was shut down in 2020.
Yeah,
the end of 2020, and some Redditors were diligent and downloaded. It sounds like about 80% of the existing material and uploaded it to archive.org.
Yes, I'm saying the Internet Archive. There's a lot of stuff there. But I mean, Smack Jeeves was one of the OG webcomic sites. I believe the first page of Plume went up in something like March, no, like 2010.
Oh wow, yeah,
2010. Yeah. So yeah, and so the idea of kind of us talking about a book that's published in a different way, that means I believe she was posting 3 times a week, so maybe like Monday, Wednesday, Friday kind of thing. So every couple of days you're getting a new page. So if you think about what that does to let's say you're a diligent reader of this book, right? You're getting one page every couple of days. So you read a page, a literal single page, and that's all you have of the story, and so as everything on the web is, there are comments and responses, and so people can respond immediately to that story and almost talk along and break it down as it goes, page by page by page, day after day after day. And so yes, it's a different way to think about storytelling, and it's a different way to, as a reader, at least initially, to absorb a story when you only have it. Again, that's assuming you're reading it every single day as soon as it uploads. Obviously you could have been someone who comes to it later, and maybe you get to read a couple chapters, all the way through because you came to it later, something like that. But he said, if you were there initially,
my preferred way of reading, because I follow like BKV and Jeff Lemire and a couple others on Substack.
Yeah.
And like Substack. So for instance, Jeff Lemire's Fish Flies was coming out like that. It was like, a page a week or something like that. And I was like, oh my God, this is excruciating. Yeah. But I think there's something now compare, where that's where it is now, is like the Substack world, but Smack Jeeves, this was all free.
Yeah.
And so I do, even though online reading for comics is not my preferred way, I'm open to like reading on a tablet, but like downloaded material, like complete issues or trades. I think there is something like a pure love of the comics to this Smack Jeeves approach, both for the creator and for the reader.
Like, I think, definitely like, this idea that
you're not like a collector or a speculator. You're just someone who loves reading.
Yeah. Comics. Yeah. No, I think there's something to that, about finding that community of readers, for the creator. You're putting it up there, initially, I'm sure, without, maybe there's a hope of monetization somewhere on the line, but initially you're throwing it up there and letting the world look at it and tell you if it's good or if they think it sucks or whatever, and you keep posting and hope it finds a readership. And I think Plume did, given how long it ran and the fact that it was eventually kind of licensed over to Devil's Due to actually be put into print, that it was successful enough to,
and a little wild that it came, then to single issues, then to trades, then to Omni. Yeah. Even though it was all out on the web for free the whole time. And it still is. Yeah. And we're going to talk about, I guess we could talk about the ways to read it, which plumecomic.com is the easiest way. It's totally free. You can read the entire series right now. Yeah, I don't even think there's like ads on the website.
No.
Certainly not like the junky video ones or anything. No. You can download a PDF. Yeah.
You can download a full PDF of the Omnibus, which is kind of currently the only way you can find it in print.
The Omnibus. Because it does not have the 2 extra stories, the 3 extra stories that are in the printed Omnibus.
The print Omnibus has a couple of short stories there, but that's currently out of print right now. So I believe the deal that Kaylin had struck with Devil's Due is done, basically, whatever that initial print run was. There were some print releases. I think there was basically 2 runs. There was the first 5 issues and the next 4. And then
like mycomicshop.com is a little confused about it.
Well, yeah. And then
it doesn't just number them 1 to 17.
Well, because the numbering restarted again. There was like a second, when it came back, it was a new number 1. It was like Plume,
right?
Number 1, series 2 kind of thing. So if you happen to find it there or in any kind of collected material, it is a little harder to find it all and make sure you have it all. So really, the omnibus is the way to go. That omnibus was only like a couple of years ago, 2021. So I mean, the first Devil's Due print issue was 2012. So that's a couple of years after she started on Smack Jeeves. And then the whole run went out. That second series was in 2014, 2015, somewhere in there. So basically what we're saying is the omnibus that came out several years after everything had been done, either on the web or any other previous print version. So
which is the way omnis are, with the big 2 as well.
Yeah. But again,
it's going to be years before we get it will be years before we get, like, for instance, the Batman Tom King Omni.
Of course.
Which is 85 issues. Yeah. He finished it years ago.
Yeah, that was 2018, like
16 to 20 or 16 to 19.
19, something like that. Yeah. But the point of that is, though, you can find those issues. You can find the individual trades. You can find it's available in other media. That's right. Readily available, just not in the omnibus collection there of everything together. So, but so the fact that Devil's Due was willing to, they stuck with Kaylin and released this version in 2021. I think that means that the single issues and the original trades must have done well enough that they felt that was worthwhile. And as you mentioned, it's sold out at Devil's Due. So if you go to Devil's Due now, it's not on their website because that contract has expired. And I think the only copies that are left are whatever personal inventory that Kaylin might have left. So if you see her at a con somewhere, if there are any copies that it's whatever she has, you can't get them pretty much anywhere else unless you find like a reseller or something like that. But at this point, we would want to try to get it directly from the creator. Support them directly. So it'd be great if they could get that back into print, because the print omnibus is a gorgeous collection. It's incredibly well printed. It's very well made. So yeah, if you can't get your hands on that, the PDF at plumecomic.com is readily available. It's there to read. It's there to access. And that's probably the way that you'll be able to find it now.
Yeah. And if you're, and she does a decent circuit of cons.
She does. She does. I mean,
I would say she's
part of the hustle. It's part of the hustle. So,
sure. And she's coming to our local or we've already seen her at the Cincinnati Comic Con. Mm-hmm. She is doing New York Comic Con, which is a big one.
Yeah, New York Comic Con, which will be when you hear this, maybe the
later this month.
The week after, you if you're listening to this in real time, and then also I think Grand Rapids in Michigan. I think that's it's not a hometown con for her; it's a home state con. I think she lives in Michigan, so she's
from the Great Lakes region.
Yeah, she's from the Midwest area there. So, but yeah, part of the hustle of an mainly independent comic creator is going to these shows and selling your books at your table, hand to hand. So it's one of the things that when I go to shows, you go to Artist Alley, and obviously they're all the big names, all the big major creators, not just DC and Marvel, but the guys and creators from Boom and Image and things like that. They always have the tables full of stuff, and they're super long lines, but there are people usually in the middle there who are just there trying to make a living, trying to sell a book, trying to sell their prints or whatnot. And you want to try to stop by and see them and see what their work is. And if you can try to support them, all the better, as I think that's the community that Kaylin is kind of part of, the people out there just hustling all the time, making their stuff, whether putting on the web in some capacity, or maybe through a Substack or something like that, some sort of pay or Patreon feature. Just trying to go out there and do comics on their own terms, which I think something that you and I both wholly support. So,
by the way, if anyone's looking for a con to go to, that Grand Rapids one, not a bad lineup in terms of comic creators.
Yeah, and that's later in the year, I believe.
It's November 2023, and a lot of guys I've seen. I'm not sure it's worth the drive for me, but for Evan Doc Shaner, it's almost worth it.
Yeah, who also
this is evergreen content I'm spewing right now.
yeah, but I think Doc Shaner
got a shelf life of a month.
I think he's also a Michigan guy as well. I think that's where he's based out of.
That would make sense.
Again, pretty close to him there. So yeah, so if you are reading in the omnibus, which again is probably the only way you're going to find it, the way we're breaking this down, we're not doing the whole omnibus in one go. We are breaking it in half. So our first episode is effectively volume 1 through 2, right, Mike? And that's, what was that? Yep. That's like chapters 1 through 9.
Something like it's a 17 total, right?
Yeah. So I think first episode, first week, we'll discuss issues 1 through 9, and there's kind of very obvious breaking point as you're reading it. You'll feel like, oh, that feels like an ending, like a season finale kind of thing. So that's first episode we're talking, and then the second episode will wrap it up, which is volumes 3 and 4, aka issues 10 through 17, which takes you through the end there of the omnibus. So if that's what you're reading, whether if you're lucky enough to find the print copy of the omnibus or you're reading online, that's how we're breaking it down: 1 through 9, and then 10 through 17.
Yep. Is there anything else to say about? I mean, certainly not about Smack Jeeves, because everything we say is it's not there anymore.
Yeah.
And frankly, Devil's Due, like you can't buy this at Devil's Due anymore.
You can't. Yeah, you can't. But they're still out there. Devil's Due is one of the bigger, smaller press books publishers. They've had an interesting history.
And it seems like they do a lot of this, right? Like they take like a pre-existing webcomic or something that was self-published, and let's take it up a level in production value and scale.
They had been. Yeah, they had been. And I think that's kind of what they're a little more focusing on now. So, Devil's Due as a publisher, they started in 1999 out of Chicago. So they haven't been around. Well, depending on how you look at it, haven't been around that long. It's possible that one of your co-hosts graduated from high school that year. So it's definitely not that long ago. But, they started, it's a lot of it is like, kind of like initially they were kind of like slightly off brand stuff. A lot of licensed stuff, which is how a lot of small press comics kind of get going and get inventory and get books out. You get some license and some lesser known, maybe a little more niche, a little more culty licenses to put some books out just to get your name out there. I think currently now they are kind of shifted their focus a little bit to really kind of put out books, as they say, for supernatural, sci-fi, and dark humor fans. So at this point they're trying to find a lane maybe that fits with the branding of Devil's Due. But initially that wasn't always the case. There was a lot of licensed stuff. I think initially their biggest claim to fame, and the way that I knew them, I knew them from 2 basic comics. The first one was Hack Slash, which by Tim Seeley.
Yeah.
It was the initial home of Hack Slash. Tim Seeley, Chicago guy, kind of makes sense. It started there 2004, I believe, and the first 5 or 6 years it was at Devil's Due, and every miniseries, spinoff, whatever volume it was, that's where Hack Slash was. And Hack Slash is an incredibly successful book that Tim Seeley has done. But he left in 2010 reportedly because he didn't get paid. He stopped getting paid. I think Devil's Due was having some financial issues, and it didn't quite end well. Maybe that relationship, I don't know how it was, but ultimately Tim Seeley took Hack Slash with him to Image, where it is now, and it continues to thrive. So that, I think that's one of those things with some of these small press publishers. What's the revenue look like? What's the cash flow look like? Can you pay these people? Can you keep talent in? Can you honor some of these contracts? It's sadly a recurring theme, new story that comes across for some of these publishers. So yeah, that was something that they had a little trouble with, I think, at that time. But I think it would also like, well, would Hack Slash have existed without a place like Devil's Due?
No, I mean, because Tim Seeley, by the time that came out, Tim Seeley already had a name, right?
In 2004, I'd have to look up, and I don't know.
I guess that's going.
That might have been his first. I mean, that was his first major creator-owned work. I think that's what kind of put him on the map, at least to a larger audience. And
I guess I didn't encounter him really until much later with like New 52 stuff.
Yeah, and that's post 2011. So
right,
that's
almost
that's
a decade later.
That's after he's taken Hack Slash with him away from Devil's Due. So he had that whole run there before he starts really digging into some of the larger creator-owned stuff, kind of specifically at DC. But the other big thing that Devil's Due had for a while was they had the license for G.I. Joe.
Yep.
And
Seeley worked on that too, right?
Well, so they acquired. It was kind of co-published with Image in terms of how it was actually published and printed or whatnot. But they had the license. They got it starting in 2004, and it ran until 2010. And I'm sorry. 2010, I think it was. And what's interesting about that is they picked up the G.I. Joe: A Real American Hero, that specific name.
Okay.
That was the original name of the comic that ran at Marvel. That was written essentially all by Larry Hama. That went for 155 issues at Marvel, and from the mid 80s to like 1994. And so there was a 7-year gap before Devil's Due picked up the license again. And what they did was they basically picked up the story that they saw fit 7 years later and started continuing with a new number 1, but it was still called G.I. Joe: A Real American Hero. And they told their own continuity, their own story based off of where their creators thought the story would have left off. And they did that all the way until the license expired in 2010. And so the funny thing that happened was after Devil's Due lost the license, it was picked up by IDW. IDW did 2 things with the G.I. Joe license. Number 1, they started with a brand new number 1 and started a whole brand new continuity. Here's a whole new storyline that, same characters, but we're starting the story brand new. And the second thing they did was they brought back Larry Hama and they picked up G.I. Joe: A Real American Hero with issue 156, picking up directly after the end of the Marvel Comics run, completely ignoring the Devil's Due run. And so all those like 40 some odd issues that were published on Devil's Due were basically forgotten. And what's interesting is they're now collected. I think they were reprinted by IDW, but they're reprinted under like the label Disavowed, which works really great with the idea of G.I. Joe and all that. But
right.
But so for a while there, what they had was kind of these 2 comics. And then kind of around the same time, really, when I guess probably comes with some of their financial issues in like 2009, 2010, something like that. They lost that major license. They lost Hack Slash, was probably their biggest book, most popular book. And I guess they've kind of had to reorganize. And when you look at some of the stuff they've done in the years since, I think some of it is, finding some webcomics, giving them a place, making some sort of deal with the creator in terms of publishing rights and all of that. And so now that they're kind of drilling down their focus into this, sci-fi, supernatural, dark humor, maybe a little horror kind of thing, they're trying to find a bit of a niche, which is, I think what some of these smaller press publishers have to do.
Sure. I mean, I think
it's hard to do superheroes, so.
Well, that, and every time I see a book from, I mean, you could remove the branding, and I think with like 90% accuracy, I could pick AWA books out. And certainly Mad Cave. Sure. I don't know, like they'd have a distinct profile. It used to be more the case that like Boom Books had a certain look and certain type that they went for, but they've really broadened their catalog.
They have, because
everyone
they've gotten
starts
bigger. They've gotten narrow. Bigger. But for something like Devil's Due, I think for them to survive, I think they realize we can't be as broad. Like now, maybe they still would go after something like Plume because it does have that supernatural bent to it. It's got a bit of a dark kind of wry humor to it. So it still does kind of fit with what their profile is right now. But yeah, that's kind of the lane that they're swerving into and trying to own, at least in their segment, but they're still not books you're probably going to see if you walk into your comic shop on a Wednesday. These are books that are available to order. Definitely. They're in the previous catalog. You can get them from the distributor, but you probably, for the most part, you're probably going to have to order them specifically. A lot of shops, right. Maybe in the Chicagoland area where some of those creators, some of the shop owners maybe know some of the maybe some local creators or have a better relationship with the people at Devil's Due. They might have some of those books on the shelves, but I mean, like I can't recall ever seeing, at least the past handful of years, maybe even like 10 years, seeing a Devil's Due book on the shelves, like on the new release rack.
No, and you and I both stick our heads in more than one comic shop.
Oh yeah, I'm saying all the
unless
shops,
the fine gentleman from Up Yours with More are listening, in which case we only ever look at Up and Away Comics in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Yeah, but no, it's one of those smaller press things that you pretty much have to pre-order or order specifically through your shop if you want to get. And of course, you can also order them. You can order things directly from the publisher themselves. You can go to Devil Due's website and see what books they have right now. But they're out there surviving and doing what they can, like any other small press publisher. So yeah, without them existing, we probably wouldn't get Plume in any sort of printed capacity, unless it was completely self-published, which is, that's pretty hard to do for a comic creator, especially I think even like a webcomic creator, so I think Kaylin getting that whatever contract she had with Devil's Due so we can get a print version so they could sell and she could sell at shows and whatnot. It's just another way to get your book out there. Cause I think as a creator, you want to reach as many people as you can. And there's no better way than like hand selling your book to someone directly at a con. They can look at it, they can open it, they can see the artwork, they can get a feel for the story right then and there, and they can talk to that person. They can talk to the creator as they're holding the book. And as someone who's been in that situation holding a book, like it's hard to say no. When you pick a book up, you start looking at it and the creator is there talking about it and you can sense their passion for the story. Like it's hard to say no and be like, yeah, you don't want to put that back. Like I'm not going to buy that one. So, it's such a great way to reach people who maybe otherwise wouldn't have found her work because like you, Mike, I have no problem reading digitally, but I do differentiate reading digitally and reading on the web.
Yeah. And as much as I mean, I deeply, deeply enjoy Plume. Mm-hmm. If someone had given me a link in 2012 and said, just check back every 3 days,
wouldn't have read it.
I would not have. No, I mean, I would have read everything that was there and made myself current. And I would have maybe gone back once or twice, but I do. Yeah. I just don't have the discipline to do that because there's other things I move on to.
Yeah.
And
I'm not built that way to read, but there is, I think, for maybe a younger generation, either it's web comics or on like what Webtoons now, getting these chapter installments and reading it that way. They're more comfortable with it. It's no different to them, or it's as foreign. It's as foreign to I'm sure what I'm trying to say. Oh, the idea of reading like a monthly floppy is as foreign to them as us going every couple of days to a website to read another page is as foreign to us.
I mean, especially imagine you're in that world and you're like, well, I read a lot of comics. Let me go to a comic shop. And it's like, I'm sorry, for one chapter of the story, you want $5.
Well, yeah.
And there's going to be 70 chapters.
Yeah.
And then there are podcast hosts that not only buy all of those, but also buy them then in trade.
Yeah.
And occasionally digitally, it's just as a little added bonus.
Yeah. Well, that's because, we are clearly mentally not well, but yeah, listen, it's a different way to read and experience comics. And I think it when you suggested that we read this, I was excited for that idea of, yes, there's a physical copy, which I want to have, and I can read the whole thing digitally, but just the idea that the story was conceived in a different manner, with the idea that it would have been read and consumed in a different way, you know?
Right. And I do want to talk about that. And that's the last thing on my agenda for this episode, because obviously we're non-spoiler until people have read, what we cover next week. But I was talking to someone about these webtoons, and they were objecting to that. Like, they thought it somehow robbed. Webcomics.
Yeah, we need to differentiate that. Yeah.
Yes, although same objection to both.
Okay.
And their objection was that it isn't as pure creatively because the writer can really respond in real time. If they post something Wednesday and the next 3 pages are still coming, they could pivot if there's outlash, if there's outrage. And I said, how did Jason Todd die? People wrote into DC Comics.
Well, they called it. It was a total.
They called it. Yeah, right. And they voted.
Number. Yeah.
Right. But they voted. And I was like, so let's not pretend that this hasn't always to some extent been. I mean, and going back even further, what color was Daredevil's uniform or outfit? It was yellow. And people wrote into Stanley and complained about it. And he was like, I basically picked yellow out of a hat, so now I'm going to pick red out of a hat. And people were like, okay, great. Totally on board for Red Daredevil.
Yeah,
shout out to the She-Hulk haters.
Yeah. But
the yellow suit.
It is the idea that, that there's always been feedback. Their comics literally post letters from readers where they talk about, so.
Right. But there's some purist notion out there for some people.
Yeah.
That something has to be conceived like a ship in a bottle before we're allowed to see any of it.
Yeah. And I think that's crap. I mean,
it is crap. And now I like some people do write that way and they make great stuff.
Yeah.
But that does not mean all of a sudden that's the only way to write.
Sure.
And this is just taking the other end of the spectrum to a new sense of immediacy, which matches the spirit of our age. People commenting in the middle of the week is the 2010 equivalent of people calling into a hotline in the 80s.
Yeah. But also it as a creator, it isn't like whoever you're talking about, this is like a less pure way to go. As a creator, this. You can't post something daily and then be shocked when you get comments on it immediately. Like you can't be blindsided by that. There's an understanding that there's a contract there that I know by posting this story page by page, that if I do something on a page that I know I'm going to resolve in 4 or 5 or 6 pages, or even, several chapters later, it's the same kind of idea of if I put this cliffhanger in at the end of this issue, and then it's a month later, before I even get back to it. And maybe I don't get back to it next month. Maybe I come back to it in 2 months or 3 months. It's the same idea. It's just that time period is short, that, as a creator, you have to know that when you put pages up that someone's going to comment on it. And they may take objection to what you're doing with the story, but regardless, they don't know where the story is going,
Right.
It's whether it's one page or one issue, it is effectively still the same. So I mean that's like.
I go back to what Pornsack said in our interview with him, which he was actually quoting Mike Carey, which was that if you pitch your tent in the right soil, the story writes itself.
Sure.
And so I think the big thing was the first 3 pages. She has committed herself to a Western with fantasy elements, with these characters very early on. She has the freedom as an artist to make pivots from there, but the most important parts of that happened before there was fan feedback.
And I agree. I think there's not only do you get the setting there, but you also get a bit of the tone. So you start seeing what her sense of humor is and how she's going to use that.
Right.
So how she's going to treat serious things and also how she's going to inject some levity in that. And you see all that very early on before.
And I don't think we mentioned, but the book is funny.
We only see 2 characters in those first couple pages. We just have our main 2 protagonists with kind of very few words there, but a lot of reaction shots. And so early on, you get the tone of what the book is going to be and how you're going to experience it. And I think, I think that's even more, super important in this webcomic domain, that you got to hook them early. You got to hook a reader early. and get them to stick around, because they got to come back every couple of days. They got to remember to come back every couple of days. They have to be willing to click that link in your update, your Facebook update, or your Twitter update at the time, whatever. They have to want to keep going back. It's an active thing for the reader to stay engaged, and I mean, that's incredibly hard to do as a creator. I think there's an extra amount of work there to get people to come back every couple of days. It's, in a lot of ways, it's a lot easier for a comic creator, a traditional print comic creator, to be like, hey, next Wednesday I got a book coming out, and like, oh, okay, great, there's one Wednesday there, and then it's once a month or whatever. Hey, this is new book coming out, versus every couple of days you got to get people, you got to drive traffic back to your work, and you hope you get those same people and maybe gain a few more every single time you post a page. I mean, frankly, that sounds exhausting. On top of the fact that you had to, write, draw, letter, color, conceive the whole story yourself. You're doing all that stuff yourself. And then you have to be your own pitch man, your own hype man, your own everything.
Yeah, it's a big ask for creators, which is why it's that much more important to get out and support them.
Definitely. Yeah.
When you find one that connects with you. And I imagine if I had been following this in 2010, I would have had a folder of bookmarks in my web browser where it was like, just go down the list, catch up on all my stories.
Yeah.
That's I guess the web comic equivalent of a pull list.
I guess so. Yeah.
The difference is, we're pampered. We're soft. We tell our comic shop proprietor one time, like, yeah, pull Batman for me. Yeah. And you will have Batman coming to you until 3 months after you die.
Yeah.
Like, they're never going to forget to make sure you buy that book.
If you're on the invoice, you're going to get that book. Definitely. So like I said, it's a more active role for the reader to have to stay engaged. And it's also more active for the creator, for again, someone like Kaylin, that extra bit of hustle that you have to do. And that she's basically done her entire career, because almost everything she's done has been independent, small press, self-published on the web or whatnot. She has done, at least in terms of the books that she's created, like fully written, illustrated, and everything like that. She's done some art for higher works for some smaller press publishers, working with other creators. But in terms of her stories, the stuff that she creates, it almost always has existed on the web somewhere first, self-published, before finding a home somewhere else.
Yeah. And I think just one last shout out here to our friends at Lume Bento, who we had an interview with earlier this year. They're an Ohio-based manga publisher getting their start online. They publish, chapter by chapter, page by page for free online. And the last thing he said in that interview was comment. He's like, get on there, comment on stuff. Let us know what's working. Let us know what isn't working. Like, we have talented writers, we have talented artists, but we need feedback. We need readers. We need buy-in. Mm-hmm. And not even like monetary buy-in, just need like the interaction. So
you need the engagement. Yeah.
Yeah.
I hate that word, but that's what it is.
But it was eye-opening to me, because I was like, geez, what a tough way to exist.
Yeah.
Whereas like, you and I, like, we get engagement, online, but you and I would be doing this without any engagement. The two of us engaging on a book, I think, is basically all the two of us need to keep going.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, the pre-recording stuff that we talk about is just as, inane and esoteric as we talk about it when you have to hit record.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, whether we're shouting into the void at each other or to anybody on the internet, we'll keep doing that. But yeah, these creators or a publisher like Lume Bento, whatever, they need people to check it out. And so yeah, I mean, should we transition a little bit into Kaylin Smith's kind of CV and biography and kind of what she's done and where else you can kind of see her stuff?
Yeah, we'll wrap on that, and I'll spoil now that no spoiler content for the plot. Yeah. We will do 2 episodes covering all 4 trades of Plume, followed by an exclusive interview with myself, Alex, and Kaylin Smith
Yeah, we got to talk to her. She was awesome. She was great.
So
So she gets more into her background there. But I mean, in terms of the stuff that, we can find her on, like I mentioned, it's almost always small press, indie stuff, web comic. The book she's working on now is a book called House of Lothar, which is a webtoon. The difference for those, we talk about this later on here, but the difference there is that is the vertical scrolling, like Infinity comic. It's basically made for a phone or a tablet where there are not pages per se. You just keep scrolling down vertically and the panels appear. So you're basically reading it top to bottom all the way through, which is a whole different way than, kind of the OG webtoon web comic, which was traditional page and panels. Just the way it's published was one page at a time. So, it's a different way to read a comic, one that I personally don't really like because, as I mentioned, I graduated high school in 1999, thus making me old. But she did say, we'll spoil this now, she did say that House of Lothar was coming to print at some point or going to come to print. So she didn't say where or through what means or what publisher, but you better believe when that hits print, I'm going to buy it. I'll read every bit of it when it hits print there. But, for now, it's not so much. But she has another book out outside of Plume, another book she's done called For Goodness' Sake, which I think is available on her website. It's a book that I maybe self-published or whatnot, but another book that she has, full creator, writer, illustrator, everything like that, like Plume or House of Lothar. You can also find some of her work. She's contributed mainly as an artist, a little bit as a writer, to just a handful of kind of random things here from a lot of different publishers. Maybe like let me see here. I got an issue of Afterglow, which is from the Space Between publisher, an issue of Hope, which is from
more than one. I think she was the main artist on that series.
I think, on Hope, I'm not sure. I think on Loot was multiple issues there. She contributed on, which is from Scouts. She also contributed to a volume of Garfield His 9 Lives, which is from Boom. So she's done some things as an artist, for some of his other small press publishers. But it's a lot of her actual creator-owned original stories seem to be going on the web first and then hopefully to print somewhere else. So, not a whole lot of stuff there, but her website has a full list of stuff that she has and things you can buy from her. So it's just a matter of, I said, for her, it's a different kind of grind than it is for someone who does for hire work at one of the big two or even does a creator owned book at Image or Boom or something like that. It's a different kind of schedule. I think a different kind of grind, a different kind of buy-in to build a readership and to tell the stories that she wants to tell. But at the same time, there's no one looking over her shoulder giving her notes. There's no one telling her what kind of stories to tell and what direction she go. She's not getting noted to hell from anywhere else. So I'm sure there's some freedom in that and a level of independence that I would assume she wouldn't want to trade for anything.
Yeah. And I mean, the other thing is she's proven through Plume that she has the discipline and the drive to stick to her own determined publishing schedule. And I think a lot of people just could not do that.
And I think that's part of the grind too, right? Like if you have an audience, whatever it is, and like you start being late, you start missing, I was going
to start shouting out artists by name.
But I mean,
one of which we covered a wonderful book called The Nightly News. Of a guy who I don't think could survive in this world.
I mean, it depends on how, if he has everything written beforehand or not, but it's a matter of you have to have that discipline or you will drown. You will lose, you'll hemorrhage readers if you don't have your updates there, especially if it's a book that has a following, that's gained a following. You have to be ready with these updates. You can't fall behind. And so, the discipline is it's the same kind of discipline I think you need to put out monthly books. It's just, it's just that time frame is compressed. And so, whatever she ends up doing, how these books either first get published or sent out to an audience. And then if they get published in print later, I think you and I both will be there to buy them and read them and consume them. I tried to check out House of Lothar on Webtoon, and I can't do the vertical scrolling thing. It's not for me. But that is where the audience is right now. And the audience for that type of comic and that type of reading is massive.
Yeah.
And a lot of that's a generational thing. And you know what? That's great. However you can read and consume comics, however you can support creators and support their work, go do it. My support will come from when there's a issue that I can read in my hand and then put into a bag and board and put into a cardboard box. That's how I show my support. But if you're someone who digs the webtoons and loves that vertical scrolling format, by all means have at it. Read comics any way you can, discover them any way you can, support the creators any way you can.
100%. Yeah, there's no wrong way to read them other than not reading them.
Absolutely. Yep.
But everyone's entitled to their preference. We are two increasingly old guys. The more we talk, the older we sound.
Oh yeah, no, yeah. That ship sailed long ago. So
yeah,
but I'm okay with that. It's said, however the kids, however the youths this day are getting into comics, I am all for it. However they're reading, whether it's a webtoon, whether their entryway is manga or whatever it is, however they're finding a way to read and consume comics, to engage with the medium, I'm all there for. And if that's the way you got to support a creator like Lynn Smith, said I'm willing to make that sacrifice. I guess I'll do what I can because I think her work is great. And I said I want to read more stories from her.
100%. Couldn't agree more. So excited for you guys to hear the discussion next week. Go read trades 1 and 2, issues 1 through 9.
1 through 9. Yep.
And we will see you back here for that. And just get excited for that Lynn Smith interview. I'm so excited about the run we've had here of getting to go through the books and having our discussion not tainted by a conversation with the author, and then getting to talk to the creators. And
it's been pretty great.
For the Good Asian, we had to track down artist, writer, and colorist separately. It's really nice when Will Morris and Lynn Smith package it all together for us.
One-stop shop. Yeah, it does make it easy to set those up there. So yeah, no, I'm looking forward to it. You guys hope you enjoy reading and talking about Plume next couple of weeks.
Yeah, and if you are an online reader who gets hooked on stuff, by all means, read the whole thing. We're just not going beyond issue 9 next week.
Yep.
So thank you for listening. Find us on storiedarcs.com. All the social medias. I'm so tired of listening to them. They're all in the episode description, and that's dynamically inserted. Yeah,
that's it. Yeah, at Storied Arcs.
Dynamically inserted. So whatever the landscape of social media is, whenever you're listening to this, the footnotes in the show will be correct. So give us a 5-star rating if you are on an app that allows you to do that. I think almost all of them do now. Just most of them don't solicit it the way that Apple does. But go out of your way, take 5 minutes while I'm rambling this outro, and give us a 5-minute, 5 stars, while also ignoring this rambling outro, which would otherwise prohibit a 5-star rating. Anyway, thank you for listening. Like and share, and we'll see you next week.
Peace.